Spring is moving at a good clip, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to take a look at our living wall along the road, which is part of a whole series we've been documenting for a few years now, and look at it as it transitions from the dormant state of winter to on its way to being a really solid wall for the summer months. It still has some filling in to do, but I thought it'd be nice for folks to see this, and then of course we'll do an update once it's fully locked in and blocking completely the road. So let's take a look. We'll start with the western side here, and you can see if you follow the channel when I pollarded back these curly willows, I think it was about a month and a half or so ago. I'll link here to that video where I talked about this, but this is the growth so far coming into later May. By the fall, this will be incredibly dense. So just this one plant, you can see already I cannot see through it. And this is just one member of this whole wall. You know, we've got the redbud just to the north of it that's starting to leaf out. I feel like I saw 1 or 2 flowers in here this season. And again, bear with the sound of the road. As you know, if you watch the channel, this is part of the deal, part of the reason we have all this. The elders that I put in last season as cuttings, they're really enjoying the moisture in here. And you can see the stem that grew last year is leafing out nicely, but it's also sent up a whole bunch of suckers and is starting to spread and make a thicket in here, which I'm thrilled to have. So now we've got these pollarded curly willows as the overstory and elderberry coming up underneath. And by having gone through and taken the dominant tree form of the willow and cutting it back to a manageable height like this, it allows a lot more intense summer sun to strike the leaves of these elders and help them come up into the canopy as well. The overarching goal with this whole scene is to have as much foliage density from about 2 feet to 8 feet. Again, that's our view shed to the house. And the willow can do it, but by having more diversity, having the red buds, having the elders, having some plum, that all helps. There's air potatoes and Schisandra vine as perennial vining elements, but they're not going to be really visible until later in the season. If I look at it from the far west end, so this is just over our property line, you can see it as you drive along. It's pretty significant for early in the spring. One of the challenges we have, though, is that with this huge tulip poplar just to the south, it casts a dramatic amount of shade. And so the elements that are under the shade of that tulip poplar can't form in as thickly as the areas that get more sun. So we've added in what has, to me, proven to be pretty darn shade tolerant, surprisingly, are some Nanking cherries. And we're trialing river locust or Amorpha fructicosa in here. But because it's so cool and shady, they wake up a lot later. I suspect by June or July, they'll be really nice and significant. On the inside of this fence, this is where it gets really crazy. We've got, sorry, I'm pausing as I talk, so I'll watch my step through here. The hazelnut element is very much greening up and turning into a thick, beautiful layer. Those are about 8 feet tall. They'll probably get about 12 feet tall this year. Next year, they'll be candidates for being pruned back into a pollard as well to allow more light in for the red currants, the black currants, the real shade-tolerant understory plants to come in and do well for themselves. Aronia seems like it's struggling a little bit with the amount of light that's available, but it's here. And the nice thing is it's a thicket-forming plant. It spreads just like the elder, and so I suspect it'll be able to slowly but surely send up new shoots into light areas, and it'll naturally be an ally in filling out wherever there are gaps. What a loud road. I don't know that there are going to be plants in this thin of a space that can really block the sound, but at least the view can be blocked somewhat. You can see the rhubarb's doing incredibly well here. We actually need to harvest that sooner than later to make more light for our California false indigo bush. We'll certainly document these once they flower. They're incredibly beautiful. And you can see on the south side of this, we've got the lower elements coming up. There's some blueberries in there, there's raspberries, there's currants, there's more rhubarb, there's valerian, there's Dame's rocket, there's Turkish rocket, there's sweet Sicily, there's bronze fennel, there's baptisia. Basically as much complexity as we possibly can have for a number of reasons. It creates diversity for wildlife. It also creates resiliency, that if one of these or 5 of these different plants can't make it in here, there's somebody else to fill in that gap waiting in the wings. And with the amount of fertility in this landscape, because of all the wood chips and compost and water that we redirect to this huge swale, every time it rains, water comes down this landscape, makes a sharp turn, and just bleeds into this bed slowly. We can actually pack these companions in way closer than if they were in competition with sod in an open field. So at least 40 different varieties of plants contributing to the sense of privacy that we're going for here. And again, we're in, later May. It's still early in the season. An update in July should show, I suspect, complete coverage by then. Let's look at the other side. So here's the eastern side of our driveway, and the beauty of having the old stalks of the miscanthus woven in is that all winter they've provided great coverage for us, and now as the green elements start to green up, it's a great backdrop, and you truly cannot see into the chicken yard already. And then now as the hops are starting to climb up and weave their way through, you can see them climbing. They're already to the top of the fence. I would have liked to have had the time to trim out all the dead material, but I just didn't. But they add to the blockage, so why not? The hops is climbing, doing its thing, and the miscanthus grass, which is absolutely a hot weather perennial, they're just barely waking up. But this colony has expanded. It's incredibly happy here. And I think this year we'll see a wall of miscanthus thicker than I could imagine. We're going to have to start pruning it back and using it as a chop and drop because we have other members in here. But it grew about 3 inches in the last few days. I suspect in a month it'll be my height. We can see the Carpathian walnut as some of the overstory elements in here leafing out, very, very happy. There's a plum that's flowering this year. There's aronia that's flowering this year. So there might be fruit for the wildlife that's coming up this season. You can see some aronia flowers here. And the giant perennial sunflower is on its way to become another very happy, thick, herbaceous perennial element this season. But let's look at some new additions that were added in this spring. These cuttings that are at super steep angles, these are actually a variegated willow type. We're doing some pruning for Sasha's mom. Thanks, Bootsy. We got some cuttings this winter. And so we were able to prune her plants back because they needed some renovation, and we stuck these in with the idea that they can become overstory with the sunchokes filling in through them. Now, a lot of you might be watching this and saying to yourself, it's really obscene how close everything is planted. How are you supposed to harvest the fruit? How are you supposed to manage these plants? Well, the important thing to remember is that in this scenario, we're looking for absolute peak density of plant material, absolute highest diversity and resiliency, and less about ease of access and convenience for us. In fact, we don't have any intention to harvest elderberry fruit or currants or different medicines from this area. This is for the wildlife, and because it's next to the road, we're not really interested in that material. But having this level of density, it's crazy how functional it actually is. Here you can see the perennial sunflower clumps coming up very happily. We saved seed from them last fall and are trying to grow them out from seed just to see if we can understand how to propagate them. And in and amongst them are these new cuttings of that variegated willow. It's really pretty. It'd be interesting to see if the willow, the new shoots, are able to keep up with the pace of these sunflowers, or if we'll have to prune the sunflowers a bit so the willows can get up into the canopy. But this was a distinct gap in this area. So just to the north of the miscanthus, here is where we added all these willows. We did this in March, and I think we're at 100% rooting. Maybe there's one or two that didn't thrive. They should be a beautiful element. And again, there's that woven wall. It's the dead stalks of last year on their own make this side just about completely invisible from the road. That's probably enough for now. I'm looking at it from across the street, and you can see there's so much more growing to do. But here we are in early season in a cold climate with incredible density and diversity of plants starting to come into this will be their 4th season here, with some real heavy management, pruning and cutting and carbon cycling and all that. And hopefully by the end of the year, I think this will be the year that it will be just a literal wall of green that you can't see through, except for the driveway. We'll do an update in a month or two as some other cast of characters come into peak flower and the miscanthus gets up to full height. But for now, thanks for watching.